An inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I mentioned after the first break about the Grab Your Gusto Wellbeing podcast learning series. The content of this program is adapted from part one of my recently published book called Purpose Ignited, How Inspiring Leaders Ignite Passion and Elevate Cause, which is now available on Amazon. I wrote it to awaken readers to their passion and purpose and help transform them into inspirational leaders who enliven the workplace and elevate the contribution of business to all its stakeholders. So that's where the content came from. If you're just joining us, my guest today is from the San Francisco Bay Area, Joyce Tom, the founder of Energy at Work and speaker, executive coach, and catalyst for change. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So for this last segment here, this is great, because people are going, well, but oh, this sounds good, but, along the way, what am I gonna find? And I love your concept that you talk from this notion that we tend to believe that more is better, and then we keep pushing until burnout happens, which is certainly something that's happened for a lot of us in the pandemic, especially if we have a goal versus journey mindset. So tell us more about that, and why do we tend to do that? What's that all about?
Well, I think it's natural, especially in this time and age and culture, that we think, especially if we're conflating a goal mindset with purpose, then the more goals we have and the more we accomplish them and we just tick them off, like Pokemon, things, then it's good. It's better. We're doing more. But actually, in that bigger grand scheme of things, it's not about, how many little things, how many goals we accomplish. It's really whether or not it's in alignment with our purpose. And so people tend to, especially if they're not listening to themselves, they haven't developed those self-awareness or energy awareness skills, then we overdo and we burn out. And then if you look at the amount that we're able to contribute over our lifetime, we push, and then we burn out, and then we're not contributing very much after we've burned out. So it's not really, the optimal outcome. And so what's really going on there? It's this mindset thing. And then what people often tend to say is like, there's never enough time and I don't have enough energy to do what I want. But I think that's not actually the case. And I think people are looking kind of in the wrong direction with that. Does that make sense to you?
It does. In fact, I want to, this is a perfect time to mention this. I literally just freshly authored an article for my collaborator and partner WorkProud for their thought leadership site. And as I was digging around for what did I want to comment on, what's going on right now that I want to talk about, and I discovered a couple articles that said that fully 50% of the North American workplace plans to change jobs in 2021 after the pandemic, because there's a lot of reasons for that. They feel disconnected from their employer, they feel like they're not being valued and appreciated, and there's a restlessness that's just palpable, among many other things. But then when I dug deeper, I discovered this whole notion of the Great Resignation is what it's being called. And apparently it was predicted by a professor that this exact same thing would happen, that a majority of, or a lot of the population would go looking for new jobs once the pandemic kind of subsided. And so that absolutely speaks to burnout. That was the number one thing that was cited in these articles, was people are just burnt out, which totally speaks to the notion of energy and just what you were talking about. So employers, companies, leaders, this is really, really critically important to pay attention to recognize if your people really do feel this way. I want you to think about the ramifications of 50% of your people leaving in a year's time. The recruiting cost alone to replace those people is enormous. Now you got to train them, onboard them, bring them up to speed. They will not be at the same level of performance as those who vacated positions before. So it's well worth doing something now to help your people address this mindset, this notion of burnout that Joyce is talking about. That's kind of where my mind went as you were talking.
Sure. And so I work with corporations on resilience, right? Because resilience and burnout, like the more that you can help people develop skills that will help them be more resilient, the less burnout there is. But I wanted to talk, you brought up an interesting point, and I think that people are, again, not necessarily assigning the right causes and effects. So they've been unhappy, especially during the pandemic situation, and they don't feel very good. And they're thinking that, oh, it's this job. If I switch
Right.
jobs, it'll
Right.
all be okay. But
Mhm.
I think that it's not necessarily the job, although of course corporations and situations do vary. I think it's more this idea of thinking of this driving and this more and more and more. I've got to do more, or I feel so much pressure to do more, and then the burnout that's happening. And that they're going, if they keep the same mindset, then they're going to go ahead and take that to the next job, and they're going to experience the same thing there. So I think it's worthwhile to like take a step back again and look at some of the underlying causes and what might be useful to help people overcome these obstacles that they feel are preventing them from having a happy, fulfilled, purposeful life.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the reasons I want to bring this up, is that individuals within a company can do this work for themselves. And then, of course, let's meet in the middle and get leaders and companies to also ask, how are you doing? What can I do to help? And how are you feeling, et cetera. And one of the things that you talk about, which I completely agree with, is the role of how stress limits our perspective. And then we've got this narrow tunnel vision. So tell us more about how does that factor in as an obstacle here?
Right. So stress does, well, the neuroscience does say, that when we're stressed out, our vision, both our physical vision and our metaphorical vision, just narrows. And so we just are like hamsters on the wheel. We just start, okay, there's the goal. I've got to make my deadline by Friday. I've got to do this next thing and the next thing and this next thing and the next thing. And of course that stresses our system out, and we burn a lot of energy that way that's not needed. And so there's that issue of like, that's so wasteful for our life force energy. And how can we approach getting work done without all that stress? And then the other thing is that when we have this narrow vision, we're not connected with our purpose, because our
Right.
purpose is this big vision. And
Expansive.
so it's hard. We just get caught into the little details, and we're not seeing how it fits in with the journey that we're wanting to make. So I think that things that we can do, it's not just stress management for health reasons, it's stress management for quality of life and quality of the journey towards our purpose reasons as well.
And back to Joyce's points about the importance of self-awareness, you can start to recognize that you're probably governed by a stress mindset when you start saying things like, I gotta, I have to, and I can't, right? So just pay attention to how often those things come out of your mouth, because they're probably connected to something that you perceive as stressful. So one of the other things that you also do, I love working with metaphors, and you have an energy metaphor of using working capital versus reserves. What's that?
Right. So the way a lot of the ancient traditions who work with energy view it is like, there is what we would call a working capital amount of energy. This is the amount of energy that we use in daily life, to do our chores, to do our work, etc. And we use it. And then we replenish it, and we replenish it with the typical things that you would consider self-care, like good sleep, good food, exercise, etc. But underneath that is this concept of, they don't use this terminology, but I think we in modern society could understand it, a reserve capital. And that's the energy that carries us through life. Like on that road, on that journey from birth to death, it's that underlying amount of energy that moves us forward and helps us develop over time and mature. And so they're different things. And what we can expect to do is, as we live our daily life and we use up energy, it's not like we should just conserve and sit still and use as little energy as we can. We want to expend energy and use it to live and enjoy life. But if we are not listening to how much energy we're using, and we're overdoing, and we're burning the candle at both ends, we're going to dip into our reserves, into our savings account. And if we use that reserve energy, it's very hard to get that kind of energy back. And so then what happens is we end up with a permanent burnout. Like we just can't move forward in our life at all. And so differentiating between when we're just using our working capital energy versus when we're using our reserve energy is really important. And I don't think that most people actually consider that or can sense that.
I would agree. Now I'm really curious too, because I noted that when you were talking before that I think you also attach that to the wisdom tradition of the path of addition and path of subtraction. I've never heard this language before. Tell us more about that.
Right. So this also ties in with the idea of more is better, right? So the path of addition says that if we want to move forward towards something like our purpose or even a goal, many times there is an approach that says, oh, do more, gain more skills, get more accomplishments, have more experiences, more and more and more and more. So it's the path of addition. What can I do that's going to help me go forward, right? But then there's another path, which is called the path of subtraction. And the path of subtraction, which actually speaks to something you mentioned earlier.
I was just about to put that together myself. Go for it.
Which is what can we take away that's a hindrance? What can we take away that's not necessary and that's actually consuming energy that we could better use to move smoothly and easily along the path? And it's not as familiar a concept to think, okay, path of addition, path of subtraction. I think most of us tend to focus more on the path of addition, and we don't give nearly as much priority or importance to considering the path of subtraction. And it's important that we do both.
Yeah, as we were saying before, we've got this amount of energy, and yes, we can stoke it and such, but better to really be just choiceful about where to really put our energy and our time. And is that really worth our time? Is it really going to allow us to be able to express our highest possible purpose and serve at our best, highest level? And it's amazing to me how much, let's call it busy work, that really gets done that takes up so much energy, right? That we really don't have to do. And someone else would gladly do that for us.
That's right. And it's also encouraged at work by sort of the norms, that the idea of FaceTime, right? It's not really satisfying work, but you have to look busier. You have to stay till 10 at night to look like you're worthy of promotion or something like that. And when we actually tune into ourselves and we have this real deep sense of what's right for us and what are we here to do? It's not here to be doing some of these other things that aren't part of our purpose. They may be part of other people's purpose, which is great. Let them do it. What really is important to us, and how can we stay on track and on purpose?
Yeah, so as a quick example, listeners and viewers, I was having a conversation with a gentleman yesterday, and we were talking about some way of maybe trying to find a way to collaborate between our two companies. And he shared what he was up to, and I said, that's fantastic, beautiful, great creation. Doesn't align with us. But so thank you very much. I'm happy to refer you if it makes sense, but it just doesn't make any sense for us to put any energy into that because it's not aligned. It doesn't thread through our purpose. So that kind of ability to recognize and say thanks, but no thanks works. So you already heard me say, Joyce, sorry, we're getting so close to being out of time already. It's just amazing. You already heard me say that my approach to stoking energy is through the logotherapeutic lens of trying to find more meaning, getting more access to it. Maybe in a minute or so, can you give a couple of approaches that you offer to people to stoke energy or to manage energy?
Sure. I think purpose, as you said, like purpose really does. It helps us, it helps our brain because research shows that when we feel like we're on purpose, we have much more cognitive resilience. And so that's really important. That gives us more energy to be able to be clear and creative and move forward on our goals as well as our purpose. And then also when we're on purpose, we don't have as much cortisol. So that stress that drains us also drops away as well. And so that is a great way to gain purpose. So it's sort of this loop that happens that, if we're on purpose, we get more energy. And when we have more energy, we can be more on purpose. So I think that those are really important things to help generate energy. And then, of course, many people have heard that the positive emotions, like focusing on gratitude, is an amazing and really quick way to generate a lot of energy. So there's a lot of these different easy, simple approaches, but maybe people haven't put it together to say, if I do this practice, it will help me fuel my purpose. They might just think, oh, it feels good, but no, it's more than that. It will actually contribute to your leading a more meaningful and satisfying life.
Beautiful. Well, here we are at the close, and you know that the show is listened to by people across the world, and they generally tune in because they're out to be able to elevate their own connection to meaning and purpose, or they want to help create cultures where people feel enlivened and want to do their work at their highest level, or become inspirational leaders themselves and do business that betters the world. What would you like to leave our listeners with today?
Yes, so I think that this idea of the sustainable change leading to growth is super important, and if we want that, then we need to take a moment to reflect on what's gone before and put it in the context of a process or a journey so that we can go ahead and build on that foundation and move forward. And then to think about purpose as that bigger than a goal, that North Star that will guide us throughout our life and guide our decisions and actions. And then the last couple things are self-awareness is key. You can't go wrong by developing your own self-awareness and your own beginning to understand energy system. So the self-awareness of our parts, including our energy system, is super useful for purpose-driven and conscious leaders. And then just checking in on that, don't underestimate the amount of energy that we need to be successful with our purpose. So foster that, nourish that, and that will help you going forward.
Joyce, what a beautiful contribution for our listeners and viewers. Thank you so much for being my guest on Working on Purpose.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Listeners and viewers, if you want to learn more about Joyce Tom and the work she does at Energy at Work, just go to energyatwork.co. And thanks again to our partnering sponsor, WorkProud, which helps companies build a platform where your workforce receives meaningful feedback and thanks for their work from people across your company. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on air with Jared Pope, the CEO of WorkShield, talking about the current workplace issues facing many companies, some of the various ways harassment takes place, which will likely surprise you, and what companies can do to create a safe culture that reduces harassment and discrimination. Next week, we'll be on the air with Dr. Arthur Cyr McCauley, a third-time guest, this time talking about his latest book, America Reunited, a relational solution to bridging the political, social, and personal chasm dividing our nation. See you there. Remember that work is at least a third of our life, so let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.